This week on The Watchman, we are deep underground at the city of David, ancient Jerusalem, in a place where few people have ever set foot. But we are here with our good friend ZE'EV Ornstein, because what lies behind the wall over my shoulder could hold the keys to the greatest mystery in all of archaeology. What is it? Find out this week on The Watchman, only with Kufi and only right here on TBN. ZE'EV, it may be the greatest archaeological mystery in all of history, the location of the Ark of the Covenant. Indiana Jones found it, but in real life it has never been found. But the room where we are standing right now may hold some very important clues. Tell us about it.
So we're here again in the city of David, site of biblical Jerusalem. We are standing inside a cistern that would have held water dating back some 2,500 years. First temple period, Jerusalem. Now, as you look around, you could see the scope of the cistern that we're in. It's enormous, right?
Yeah.
You could see behind us over here the plaster that would have covered the walls of the cistern that would ensure that the water would be captured.
And by the way, we are deep underground. Where we are is adjacent to the Western Wall and the Temple Mount. We're right next door to the Temple Mount.
That's right. And what's strange about this cistern is that the way a cistern works is the plaster must be on all of the walls to ensure that the water does not leak out. But when you look at this cistern, there is one wall that is not covered in plaster, which seems to be a bit strange. If you look over here, you could see that one wall just does not fit in.
It looks like it was almost hastily put together.
That's right.
Like a rush job.
That's right. And why would you have an enormous cistern that can't hold water? Because this is not plastered. This is different from all the other parts of the cistern. And as you mentioned, this wall is directly adjacent to the western wall of the Temple Mount. And one of the great mysteries for generations has been what happened to the Ark of the Covenant. The question is, when was it lost? And for that story, we have to go back some 2,700 years to the time of the biblical King Hezekiah.
The prophet Isaiah.
That's right, prophet Isaiah.
First temple, Solomon's temple.
There you go, right? Both of whose seals have recently been uncovered here in the area of the city of David and the Temple Mount. And so you have King Hezekiah, the prophet Isaiah. The kingdom of Israel has been exiled by the Assyrians, Sennacherib. And now Hezekiah is ruling the kingdom of Judah, and he knows that Jerusalem is next. The kingdom of Judah is next, and the Assyrians come to Jerusalem, and they surround the city.
And they were bloodthirsty. The Assyrians were fierce and brutal.
And they were undefeated, and they come to Jerusalem. And it says in archaeological antiquities discovered in ancient Assyria that they trapped Hezekiah like a bird in a cage. But the prophet Isaiah says, Hezekiah, don't worry. By the way the king of Sennacherib came, so shall he return. He will not enter Jerusalem. Not a single arrow will fall within the walls of Jerusalem. And the next morning, the entire Assyrian army is gone. Now,
how many?
You're talking well over 100,000, according to the Bible, right? We're talking about 2 Kings.
Yeah.
We're talking, and it's corroborated by Taylor's prism, found in modern-day Iraq, which corroborates that the Assyrians came, surrounded Jerusalem, and they left. So now what happens? An amazing salvation. And now Hezekiah's son, Manasseh, who was not like his father, he did not walk in the ways of the Lord. Biblical scholars believe the wicked King Manasseh, for his own reasons, prepares these subterranean hiding places around and beneath the Temple Mount.
Perhaps someplace like we're standing right now?
Absolutely. Biblical scholars believe it could be somewhere in this vicinity. Now, why is he so concerned about the Ark of the Covenant? It's not because he was a deeply religious person. He wasn't.
He was anything but.
Anything but. But he understood that the Ark of the Covenant, at least for him, represented a national treasure. Even though it wasn't a symbol of faith, it was still an extremely valuable national relic that he did not want to lose.
Yeah, no more powerful symbol for the Jewish people than the Ark of the Covenant.
That's right. And therefore, he has the same interest that perhaps the prophet Isaiah also does at the time when he prophesies that Jerusalem is going to fall, that he understood that at some point the temple treasures, the temple itself, it's not going to save Israel if they sin. And so Manasseh said, I'm going to come up with hiding places to hide away the Ark of the Covenant. A few generations go by, and now Josiah, the righteous King Josiah, is ruling. And he begins to see, so to speak, the writing on the wall. And he gets the feeling that it's time to hide away the Ark. And so what does he do? For one last time, there is a big national celebration of the Passover holiday. And so now we're reading from 2 Chronicles, chapter 35, verse 3. Where Josiah says to the Levites who are consecrated to the Lord, who taught all of Israel, put the holy ark in the house that Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, built, as you no longer carry it on your shoulders. See now to the service of the Lord your God and his people Israel. So seemingly, Josiah is telling the Levites, that's it. You're going to carry the ark one last time, and then you're going to hide it away for it to be saved for some future time.
Josiah maybe saw or felt the gathering storm on the horizon in the form of the Babylonians.
That's right. And now you might say, well, how do you know that the Babylonians, when they destroyed Jerusalem, how do you know that they didn't take the ark, that they didn't find the hiding place?
Yeah, King Nebuchadnezzar leveled this place, leveled the first temple.
That's right. And so we have a clue from the Bible, because the Bible tells us that when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, destroys Jerusalem, it actually lists the treasures from Jerusalem that are taken out of Jerusalem and into Babylon. And among those treasures, one thing is missing, and that is the Ark of the Covenant.
Conspicuous by its absence.
Absolutely. And so it would seem that the hiding place that perhaps King Manasseh prepared and that King Josiah made use of to hide away the Ark of the Covenant, it seems to have held, that it remained a secret. And so there are lots of mysteries. People say perhaps the Ark is in Alexandria, Egypt, perhaps in Ethiopia. But one other prevalent theory is perhaps it's still in Jerusalem. Perhaps it never left. So here we are again, in an ancient cistern, dating back some 2,500 years to the first temple period of Jerusalem, standing here in the city of David, just adjacent to the western wall, to the Temple Mount. And we have this wall that just seems out of place.
It just doesn't fit.
That's right. A man-made wall,
Clearly.
seemingly concealing something that directly on the other side would lead to that area of the Temple Mount.
Yeah, it feels like this was built to conceal something, and built quite hastily, judging by the construction work and the masonry there.
That's right. And so it could be, when we think back to the time of King Manasseh, and he wants to prepare the hiding places for the temple treasures, to the time of King Josiah, who makes that fateful decision to hide away the ark for what is now millennia. And maybe where we're standing right now was a part of that story.
I know people at home are probably thinking, okay, the wall's there, just knock it down and see what's behind there. You've excavated so much else here at the city of David, but kind of a political hot potato, right?
One of the significant aspects of Jerusalem, it's historically significant, it's religiously significant, it's politically significant, and in the Middle East, when you throw all those ingredients into the pot at the same time, it can be volatile. And therefore, the mystery of what has happened to the Ark of the Covenant, at least as far as this wall is concerned, we'll have to wait for some future time and another future episode perhaps of The Watchman. Until there is more tangible evidence, more solid archaeological proof of what may have happened to the Ark, what we're left with is speculation and theories and a lot of anticipation.
ZE'EV, thank you so much, my friend. Always a pleasure with you, and you always bring us the absolute cutting-edge stories here in Jerusalem from the city of David. Thank you, my friend.
Pleasure's always mine.
Well, up next, you can see the beauty of Jerusalem today. But what did this city look like 2,000 years ago during the time of Jesus and the Second Temple? And how did it all come crashing down at the hands of the Roman Empire? After the break, you'll get an up-close look at ancient artifacts that tell the tragic story of Jerusalem and Rome. Stick around.
David Friedman has made history as the first ambassador to serve at the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. He plays a pivotal role in the U.S.-Israel relationship, and he'll be a special guest speaker at CUFI's 2019 Washington Summit. He's gone on to become one of the top voices in the U.S. administration, urging the president to move the U.S. Embassy and recognize Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the Jewish state.
Tammy and I welcome you to the opening and dedication of the United States Embassy in Jerusalem, Israel.
CUFI is thrilled to announce that he'll be speaking at our 2019 CUFI Washington Summit during the National Night to Honor Israel. You won't want to miss this historic opportunity to hear from Ambassador Friedman and our many other special guests in person. Register now to attend the CUFI Washington Summit on July 8th and 9th.
And welcome back. Jerusalem today is vibrant and alive, but 2,000 years ago, this city suffered a brutal siege at the hands of the Roman Empire that saw the Jewish people scattered to the ends of the earth. So how did this all unfold? We headed to the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. recently to get an up-close look at ancient artifacts from right here in Jerusalem that tell a stunning story. Take a look. This is a new exhibit at the Museum of the Bible. One of my favorite exhibits here, and that's saying something, Jerusalem and Rome. You're going to lead us through the history of that conflict, that clash of cultures. Where are you taking us first?
Well, first, this is a great exhibit about the relationship between culture in Judea, Jewish culture in the first century, and how it was being impacted by the Roman Empire, which came in about 60 years before the time of Jesus and influenced daily life, politics, all kinds of things.
That imperial powerhouse, the mighty Roman Empire.
Do you go along with the powers that be, or do you do your own thing? Right. And you see this impacted in daily life. People have to make decisions all the time about, do they keep doing what they're doing? Do they buy things that are associated with the empire? And the things that might be associated with that. Here's a great example. You've got an oil lamp, which is imported. Wow. It's Eastern Terra Sigillata is what it's called. It's a very specific kind of pottery, imported. And some of it's very beautiful, but some of it has some symbolism. Like this one, for example, has a depiction of the god Eros, or Cupid.
So this is a pagan god depicted on this.
Exactly.
And it's so interesting, Jeff, because Roman, obviously a pagan powerhouse, but in Israel, in Judea, in Jerusalem, they worshiped the one true God, the God of Israel.
Exactly, and you have a commandment about graven images and other gods, so...
And there you have it. Would an Israelite use this? Would they be conflicted? There's a pagan deity on it.
It's a question you have to answer every day.
But you have that Roman imperial power kind of lording it over them, so to speak, and imposing their will. So what a conflict.
And these are wealthy status items. They're expensive. So, you know, do you want to show off your wealth? Do you not? There's all kinds of questions that come up with this.
And how old are these again?
Well, these are first century AD.
So these are 2,000 years old?
2,000 years old.
This is the time of Jesus. This is when it was all unfolding. The Gospels, Acts, Jerusalem, Rome.
Yeah, wow. I mean, these items are right from that time period and the daily life of that time.
And these are?
These are ossuaries, they're called.
And that is?
It's a very unique burial practice to this area and this time period. The Second Temple, the time around Jesus, 50 years earlier, 50 years later.
Okay.
The theory is that these are related to some of the Roman practices, which have some similar design and the stone elements to it.
Okay.
Yet Jewish practice was to have the body remain together. So it's a kind of a merger of those two practices right here in front of us.
We see obviously the stunning image of Masada on the wall behind us. Now the temple was destroyed,
Right.
70 AD,
70 AD.
by Titus, the Roman general.
And by 72, they come down to Masada.
This was the final stand for the Jewish rebels, the Herodian fortress fortified of Masada out there in the Judean desert on the Dead Sea. But we have genuine artifacts from Masada right here at the Museum of the Bible. Tell us about it.
Yeah, and they're nice illustrations of just daily life again. So even though it's a very stressful situation, there's been remains discovered of a comb here, which is preserved in the desert because of the air and the climate, and a sandal, at least the heel of a sandal, or the sole of a sandal.
Yeah, as I say, it looks like a child. It's awful small.
Probably a woman's foot, but we know it's not Roman because of the style, so it's a Jewish item. And these were found at Masada. They date to the 1st century, so we don't know exactly, where, who, but just daily life at the top of this climactic moment. Even though this was a period of conflict and stress and tension, out of this century really comes Rabbinic Judaism and, of course, the birth of Christianity. That's right. So 2 of the major religions of the world are birthed during this time of conflict.
Yeah.
A great example of that enduring desire for the temple and hope in Jerusalem is seen in this very nice lamp here, which dates to the 5th or 6th century, so it's about 500 years later. Okay. But it retains imagery from the temple and gives an indication that the people were still longing for the temple. The menorah there, so the candles would have been on top. You see a date palm. You see a fruit, which is one of the fruits that would have been part of the sacrifices. Exactly, exactly. And the shofar, the ram's horn.
Of course.
All elements associated with the temple, and all continue to be symbols of that religious life and that longing that continued for centuries, even today.
Jeff, these are very rare. This oil lamp is very rare. Not many of these available around the world. Now, this was supplied, all the exhibits here were supplied by Hebrew University in Israel.
That's correct, yeah. All of the objects, all the descriptions, everything comes from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Wow. Excellent partners with the museum, and very pleased to have this exhibit here for an entire year.
Well, you just heard the tragic story of how Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. After the break, you'll see how this city and this nation, Israel, has been miraculously reborn. And we've got the photos to prove it. Folks, you'll want to see this. Don't move.
Israel faces growing threats on all sides. Hezbollah, ISIS, Iran, and Hamas never cease their attacks. But God has raised Kufi up at this moment in history to stand between Israel and those who seek to destroy the Jewish state.
Israel's enemies are on the move. As dark clouds gather on the horizon, tell the world you proudly stand with Israel. Be a courageous voice for biblical unity and moral clarity when you join Christians United for Israel. Show your love for the people of Zion with this beautiful symbol of unending support for Israel.
Wear the pin and join Kufi, a movement of over 5 million defenders of Israel. Call the number on your screen or visit kufi.org/pin to receive your pin that will show your proud support for the special bond between Israel and America.
Welcome back to the Watchman from Jerusalem. To fully appreciate the modern-day miracle of Israel, you need to see what this land looked like before the Jewish people returned and made the desert bloom. Folks, it's the ultimate before and after comparison. And a new book called Israel Rising shows it all in beautiful and inspiring detail. Take a look.
change around Israel has been so dramatic in the last 50 years, let alone 100 years, that I really began thinking, man, I would love to be able to capture this to compare, to show how much things have changed. Because for hundreds and hundreds of years, with writings like from Mark Twain and going back throughout the centuries and through the history, the land really has been lying desolate, which is exactly what Ezekiel 36 said. It'll be desolate, it'll be forgotten, the waste places will just, no one will be there. And when the Jewish people returned, things began reviving. And so I began thinking, is this what's happening right now? Is this what Ezekiel was talking about? And began really putting those things together. Eilat, down in the south of the Red Sea, we have photos from not even 100 years ago, from the 1960s, that the only thing that you can tell is comparative are the mountains in the background. And so one is just completely empty and desolate, just a little strip for an airline, or an airplane to fly in. And now it's thriving stores and hotels and palm trees, and I mean, it's like the town literally grew out of the desert. Another wonderful example is Tel Aviv. I've got a shot of Tel Aviv from 1946. This is only 72 years ago. And one of my favorite parts of this old photo is that there's black and white little dots on the beach, and they're camel caravans bringing supplies into Tel Aviv, and 72 years ago. And now, the comparison photos is probably one of the most stunning, because it's like the city just literally just grew from the ground. Perhaps what's even more stunning when we're talking about the UN and who's there first and what's going on, part of the argument is that there's always been this regional Arab population. My question is, I've got 100 black and white photos. Show me where they are. They're not to be found. Mark Twain talks about traveling any direction for 10 miles and not seeing another human being or another human habitation. Another beautiful photo we have is up from the Hula Valley, which is about 30 minutes north of the Galilee. As recently as the 1950s was a swamp. And malaria infested, nothing was growing, and it's just amazing then and now photo comparison of just an empty, barren valley now completely full of vineyards and fields and thriving communities, and you can see Mount Hermon in the background, and I mean, it's just the transformation is stunning. When God talks about multiplying the Jewish people in the land, it's happening right now, and we're seeing it, and we have the photographic evidence to show it. I started with about 2,200 old photos, and then had to shrink them down to about 100, with about 25 locations all over Israel, and then had to go find the actual locations, some of them in Judea and Samaria. The Jewish community has really taken to the book quite well. The Christian community, of course, is seeing it as a fulfillment of prophecy, as Jewish people are as well. There are 2,600-year-old prophecies that have been lying dormant in our Bibles that are coming to pass in our lifetime, if not our lifetime, our parents' lifetime. And so as believers, we have an opportunity to step in to not just simply see that God is doing these things, but really to, like you said, be a part of what is happening. We have an opportunity to not only go and see, but to go and get involved.
Well, up next, my final thoughts on the rebirth of Jerusalem, what God is doing in this city today, and what it all means for you. Stick around. And welcome back. Did you know that the legendary American author Mark Twain once visited Jerusalem? That's right. In his famous book, The Innocents Abroad, published in 1869, Twain described his visit to Jerusalem, and he was shocked at what he saw. He wrote, "Renowned Jerusalem, the stateliest name in history, has lost all its ancient grandeur and has become a pauper village." Now, Mark Twain wrote that only 150 years ago. Even then, this land was still desolate. This city, Jerusalem, was broken down. And then, the Jewish people returned here to their ancient and ancestral homeland, and everything changed. Jerusalem today is alive, it's vibrant, and it's fulfilling the words of the prophet Zechariah, who wrote that once again, old men and women will walk Jerusalem streets with their canes and will sit together in the city squares, and the streets of the city will be filled with boys and girls playing. Folks, that prophecy is unfolding today in real time right here in Jerusalem, and our team at Christians United for Israel has a front row seat. You see the information there on your screen. We want you to join us, to join our movement and be a part of what God is doing in this city today. We live in Bible times. Well, thanks for joining us this week here in Jerusalem. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.